Okay, now I just got to figure out how to stop this music so we can get started with our presentation today. Thank you so much for joining today's Week Without Violence webinar. My name is Keisha Davidson, and I'm Chief Communications Officer at YWCA Seattle Kings Snohomish, with the members of YWCA's Gender-Based Violence Specialized Services Team, which you will hear us refer to frequently as GBVSS. A few housekeeping items before we jump into today's presentation. This is being recorded, and we have recorded all of the presentations that we've had this week. We have been doing them Monday through Friday. And so you can visit our website, ywcaworks.org/WWV20, and that is where you can find recordings to all of the really amazing presentations that we have had during Week Without Violence, Black, Bold, and Brave. And so we're going to get started today. Our first speaker is Karama Williams, and she is a GBVSS community advocate. And she's going to share an original spoken word piece titled Why. So Karama, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you. I'll just get right into it. Why? Why can't I? Why can you? Why do you say something and say you didn't say it, or you didn't mean it quite like that? Why do you expect more out of me than you yourself are willing to be? Why do we play games intent on causing shame, then rationalize and justify those same ill games played? What happened to what we said to each other, to what we wanted with each other? Why do you use words to break me down and sex to build me up? You see, that's part of the problem. Too many relationships are created out of a good nut. Or once the relationship turns to mush, we want to hurt the ones we said we loved because the way their parting words rubbed wrong ways turned your mental into long hallways of hate and mistrust, misuse and disgust. What's done is done. It's over. But some just can't part peacefully. Some feel the need to run. Others are ready to use guns. What happened to the love? You know, those words and feelings shared at some point. Who are you or I to say breath leaves yours or my body? No, it's not supposed to be that type of party, shawty. But like Motley Crue said, just go, but don't go away mad. Sure, we'll both be sad, hurt, all that, but time heals many a wound. So pray for me as I pray for you, to again find someone who will love you for you.
Thank you for sharing that, Karama. That was very powerful. I think a great way to get us started and centered in our conversation today. And so I thought that we could just start off with everybody just sharing your name and your title at YWCA, and then we can jump into our questions.
I can start. Hi, I'm Colette Sampson, and I'm the Domestic Violence Legal Advocate. Good morning.
Dominique Scott, Domestic Violence Shelter Advocate.
As stated, I'm Karama Williams. I'm a community gender-based violence specialized services advocate.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nature Carter. I'm program manager with GBVSS team.
Good evening. My name is Bridget Griffin, and I'm the legal navigator for Survivors First program.
Hi, I'm Avery Sell, and I am a CSE community advocate for GBVSS.
Well, thank you ladies all for being here today. I'd also like to shout out all of the lovely purple outfits that are being worn today and Nature's background, because October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And every year for the past 20 years, YWCA has set aside 1 week during this month as Week Without Violence. And this year, we are putting our theme, our twist on it, which is Week Without Violence, Black, Bold, and Beautiful. And so I just want to thank everybody for being here to help us share information and share stories and just talk about this really critical issue in our community. so that we can build a stronger, better place for survivors and a community that actually supports those who have been survivors of all types of gender-based violence. And so I thought we would start off today with just a very general question. We know that violence comes in many forms, and when we're talking about gender-based violence, that encompasses a lot of different types of violence. And it's not always just physical abuse. There is emotional, financial, technological, and many other kinds of abuse. And so can you talk about what are some of the different ways that domestic violence can show itself, especially when it's not physical?
I'll start with an answer to that because it's oftentimes overlooked, and that is the partner who wants mom to stay home because the baby can't talk yet, right? So before daycare, we don't want to put baby in daycare because we need you to we want baby to be able to talk if something's going wrong. So mom agrees. And then all of a sudden, mom's birth control, when it's almost time for mom to be able to go back to work, mom starts being these stair-step babies because we want you to stay home. So now mom has a baby that's 3, 2, 1, and she's pregnant. And she's had these goals to go back to school, but subtly, the partner has either poked holes in condoms, removed or prevented birth control. And so that's sometimes that form of financial abuse. So now mom is dependent on her partner and she can't go out and finish her degree, or she's unable to go out and get back to work. So she's able to be at home so she's kept barefoot and pregnant, so to speak. I've had clients in the past who weren't really aware of that subtlety of the financial abuse because it kept her dependent on her partner. I think that's one way that often people don't really recognize that there might be a shift in power and control here. It's not always the norm, but I do know that it does and can happen that way.
And I'll chime in, kind of piggyback off of Karama's with the financial part. Often they will sabotage jobs. So, even though there's no physical abuse involved in that, but they will call their work, threaten to call their supervisors or constantly calling them to check and see if they're there. That kind of connects to the financial abuse because they will sabotage their access to finances, so they're in absolute control. Or they will require the survivor to sign over or give their money to them or take their EBT card or their debit card, moving things is another thing where they, will move their keys or take something and the survivor goes back to look for it and know it was there, and then they pretend that they'd never seen it. So, those are other forms of like crazy making and gaslighting. And isolation is a very big one. So you'll hear survivors a lot of times say they don't have anybody here. So they'll, either, create an environment where she pretty much disconnects from her family and friends, or they will move to a place to where she doesn't know anybody. So she pretty much is absolutely isolated and disconnected from her family. So
building off of what both Karama and Bridget said, I see a lot, especially in the legal side. I see folks who are trying to separate, but often really nervous about leaving their abuser because the abuser has many times threatened to take the children from them. And so in addition to the reproductive abuse that Karama was talking about, the absolute fear that some survivors have that they will not be able to see their children, they will not be able to protect their children, and that their abuser is going to take custody such that they don't know what's going to be happening to them, maybe potentially 50% at the time. And they may want to stay because they feel that that's the best and safest way to protect their kiddos.
I want to chime something in too, just because of the talking about the technological part, and that's the posting of pictures without permission. The posting of the provocative pictures, you know, it's your boyfriend, your husband. You sent him a cute little picture in your lingerie, right? And so then, you know, now he's upset with you. So now I'm going to blast this picture all over the internet, or I'm going to put you on back pages or Craigslist. And that humiliation factor, never beat her up, never hit her physically, right? And I think that's the confusion in the term, is the fact that violence is at the end of the word domestic. So they're always seeking out that someone was hit, slapped, punched, kicked, strangled, when they're not really understanding that there's someone just trying to exert control over someone else. So that technological piece, all of a sudden you went from having a page, Karama Williams on Facebook, now it's Karama and Tyrone. Now we have a joint Facebook page, right, at his request to figure out what I'm doing on the internet. That too is in it of itself abuse that a lot of women, and with our technological time, a lot of young ladies in particular are experiencing and not really aware that it's abusive, right? Because they didn't get hit. Their phone wasn't slapped out of their hand. He's just jealous. And that means he really likes me. Those are some of those red flags too.
I think that's a really important point, which is that you do not have to have a physical injury to feel pain. And I think that that's a huge thing that comes with domestic violence, is you have the emotional abuse and you have the verbal abuse and you have the breaking down of the self-esteem, and then potentially the isolation, so you have no one to turn to. When you take that and you put that on top of the fact that maybe you share kiddos, maybe you share pets, maybe you share apartments, belongings, etc. All of these things are really hard to peel apart and peel away from, especially when an individual has broken you down and told you day in and day out that you're not good enough, that you're not pretty enough, that you're never going to be able to get what you need done. Those are really hard things to overcome.
Man, it's all piggybacking on everybody. It's all the power and control, right, is so central, and it's any aspect that they can control. You know, like going back to what Colette was saying, if there's kids involved and you leave and you successfully leave, suddenly they're like parenting plan or child support or just any means of exerting control, right? Like everything's separated, and then at this point suddenly for some reason they want full custody even though they were never around and the child isn't even actually there. So you're like, it's just the means of maintaining contact. And then I also want to touch on the sexual abuse, and that's one of the big things. And it actually, like with Karama's spoken word, it is one of those. I often see women, like they've been broken down and then their only worth that's acknowledged by their abuser is sexual, and then you notice like almost it's picking up crumbs, and it's coercion, and it's rape by misrepresentation, right? And it's, my phone's blowing up, but it's really big, and it's hard to acknowledge because it's not a stranger assault. And it's a boyfriend, and oh, well, I was drunk, or oh, like I just didn't want to fight anymore, and oh, and like not seeing that as a violation and as violence within itself. But once again, there's no bruises, or there is, and they have you do things that you don't want to do, right? And you're partaking in threesomes or doing things that you don't feel comfortable with, but like it's for him and it's love and it makes him happy. So
Thank you all. Is there anything anybody would like to add to that?
Well, I was just gonna kind of mention the with the legal part, it's called abusive use of litigation, where they constantly, when they like Colette start talking about the legal part, they will continue to file motion after action, constantly keep them in court, constantly any minute thing. It could be 1 minute late for the visit, and they're filing a contempt, and then they got all this. So that's another piece that when they leave and they're dealing with the legal, then they start the legal abuse. So now the court system is their arena, their choice of abuse method, so that's a big one. And there's no physical, but like everybody talked about, there's the mental, there's emotional, there's the trying to prove that this is not true, and so. Yeah.
So knowing that, not all types of abuse is physical, and that a lot of it can be more subtle or can be, I don't want to say excused, but women in this situation can come up with rationale, for this. How do you help women see or to understand that they're in an abusive relationship? Or if you suspect that a loved one or somebody that is in an abusive relationship, what are some of the signs that they can look for? I know that some that you've mentioned have been isolation, but what are some of those other things?
I always wait to see if a mic comes off
No,
before I click.
that's
Sorry. So I'm going to be quick and then I'll let you go ahead and take over, Bridget. But something I definitely wanted to say with regards to this, if me as a friend, something has been normalized in my culture, something has been normalized as regular as this, that's just how the men are. I might not recognize it as my friends in abuse. I might not even know, hell, that my boyfriend is abusive. My husband for 20 years is abusive. Being transparent, my grandmother doesn't realize that my grandfather, God rest his soul, I know how people say about talking about the dead, I speak truth always, that she was herself in an abusive relationship for the whole time. At his funeral, when it was coming, a great auntie, oh yeah, Mickey wouldn't let you work, is what one of his aunties said. Now, my grandmother is a Black Martha Stewart. I mean, her whole house, she did, from the carpets to the floors, you understand me? So she had to keep herself busy because she wasn't allowed to work. So I share that transparency to move forward to when my sister was in a relationship and the father, oh, well, he's in the Army, you should marry him. Regardless of anything else, the abuse that he ran off once the baby came into fruition and all of these things, but he was a man with a good job and money and benefits, and amen, child, marry him so that you and your child are taken care of, not recognizing that there has been some abuse. So I think it's really important that we pay attention to some behaviors and ways that are maladaptive and abnormal have been recognized as normal. And we're here to black and bold, right? Normalized in the Black community, to this is how these relationships are, the head and the tail, how that is in control. And I've said enough.
And kind of piggyback off of Karama. So some of the red flags, there are two key, that's generally when I talk to survivors, this was something that was mentioned or noticed or brought to your attention before when they started the relationship. Either the child cannot stand the person, and because children don't have filters, I don't like him, or there's just something about him they don't like, and there's always one friend, family member, or somebody's like, I just don't like him. I don't like him. And generally, those are two big red flags that we're like, oh, he's nice, because you're in the throes of the love bombing and the, getting to know. And so, some people can see through it, but because you're in the love bombing stage, so you're focused on, oh, he takes me out, he listens to me, I'm like, he hears me, and blah, blah. So the person outside looking in, they see something ain't right. That's a little bit too much. So that one friend or family member and that child, they would generally always tell you about the person. And some little things, like Grandma said, that became normalized, even from childhood, that if he hits you, he likes you. So if they see something that's a little off, they're like, oh, jealousy, that's a big thing. Oh, he's just protective. He's like, you know, he just wants to make sure I'm taken care of. And it's like, you know, nobody can't look at you. I'm like, you know, why are you looking at her? Why are you looking at her, man? It's like, because, and so she's like, oh, that's cute. No, that's crazy. And it's jealousy. And jealousy can be a big red flag indicator, especially if it's very early in the relationship. And moving super fast in a relationship can also be a red flag. Because an abuser can only maintain that facade and hide behind that you know, that little perfect person only for a while. Because if you're around them for a long period of time, then they're going to start leaking. You're going to start seeing little things, and those are the red flags that you see that you've kind of dismissed because you're in the cute phase or the honeymoon phase or whatever of the relationship. Those are, you know, some kind of indicators that you can maybe stop, sit back, and, you know, reconsider.
So if you do end up seeing those red flags, one of the things that I really recommend to friends that see folks in these situations, in these sorts of relationships, is you want to try to respond in a way that's not like the abuser. So oftentimes the abuser is gonna isolate the survivor from their friends. They're gonna isolate them. You don't want to cut that person off and say, okay, well, you're not leaving him, so, or you're not leaving the individual, so I'm not going to be friends with you anymore. So I guess that's sort of just one thing I wanted to throw in there, is ways to be supportive if you do see someone in a relationship, is trying to make sure that you are not doing what that abuser is doing. You're not telling her what she has to do. You're giving her choices, and you're being supportive of her choices because she knows what's best for her safety.
I kind of wanted to just piggyback on what is being said. And when we look at, you know, for survivors on all spectrum, but you know, especially for when we talk about commercially sexual exploitation, is that the warning signs are really still the same, because there's the common thread of, you know, you're either being treated exceptionally well in the beginning of the relationship, and what we know that to be is the grooming process. And then what happens is that the trust, and there's a state of loyalty that is created within that relationship. Then, you know, what starts to happen too is that, you know, the abuser or the trafficker will start to make you feel sorry for him or her. And so generally what happens is the conversation will start to happen in the capacity of, oh, this is what happened to me in my childhood. I was really treated really bad, or the abuser will also too say, I don't have family or friends. And it just depends on variations of the relationships. And it never being their fault when something happens. And those are kind of what we call tried and tested, trying to control survivors through like constant communication with, you know, well wishes and love, and, you know, abundance of text messages. And these are the newer trends now, especially for some of the younger women. When I'm talking with them, is like, what, you know, just give me a little bit of the story of what happened, like how did this all started. And then also too, what happens is there's a shift in the relationship, and now it starts to become a very overwhelming, and things are, you know, they're always criticizing you for things you do, and you can never do anything right. And that's the part where you're set up. And so when the financial, you know, destruction comes into play now, that because we don't have the money and we're going to have to do these things, and remember, I took care of you in the beginning, and really, you know, prying into taking, you know, survivors apart from their families or friends or any ties, and making them feel like so isolated to where they can't really rely on anybody else, or for that trust to be, you know, like, I can't really tell anybody about this. And especially for African American communities and communities of color, it's the shame. And it's the feeling of, well, I told you so, especially like Karama said, especially if I said I had an eerie feeling about this person, now I got to go back to this person to let them know that something has happened to me. And those are just, I mean, the trends can be, you know, a variety of things, you know, for the relationship. But when we talk about abusive relationships and the warning signs, it's the same power wheel in the dynamics of the framework that we work with. because the sex trafficking will was a spinoff and was built on the foundation of the DV power wheel. And those things can actually be accessed online if you're viewing and you want to know kind of like what this power wheel is about. And that power wheel is something, it's a best practice that's used to really be able to identify the warning signs. And, you know, it still goes back to isolation, blame, criticism, anger, control, and sabotage. And what we always talk about is gaslighting.
I want to chime something in that both you and Nature and Bridget mentioned. What Bridget was talking about was the representative that pops up. His representative or their representative at first, and so that's why they reel you in really quick, because they can't stick up with that person. And then what you just mentioned, Nature, was the trauma bonding, because how they start telling you their story, how I grew up as this, and then she or the other person in the relationship, I grew up that way too. So then they often think they can heal each other together because they're bonded in this pain, and not really aware that now, in a sense, we're just having a mutual power and control cycle that's going around here. We're being abusive to each other in some form. Maybe he's more physically, maybe my abuse is is emotional and mental, but because of these trauma bonds, and we think we can help each other heal or relate better. Because of that, I know a gentleman who clearly told me he doesn't date women who were raised with a daddy. They'll be able to catch my bullshit easier than the woman who was raised without a daddy. He said that out loud, like it was okay and normal. And I'm just listening like, so glad you're just a friend I know, because that's scary. It sounds predatory in a sense. So people, they do know that. And a quick one, we have, pheromones? You really knew how you think, what do I have? Do I have something written on my forehead? Why do I keep attracting these same? You literally really are giving off a scent, sis. You literally really are giving off a scent, and they can smell it when you're unhealed. Like there's science and everything behind that. And that's where the healing part comes in. So.
Thank you for sharing that. I've definitely run into those men before, and fortunately was able to run away quickly. But, you know, talking about like the healing process and how we get to that point, once somebody has identified that they are in an abusive relationship and they're at a point where they're able to seek help and they turn to YWCA, what does that look like? And I would just love to hear from each one of you, like, what is the day in, you know, your work and the journey with the survivor?
I'll start. And really, most importantly, every journey is as different as every story, right? Like we ask the same questions. It starts with a phone call, but from that moment, everything afterwards is really specific to that survivor's experience. And one of the things, like what we talked about before with the isolation and everything, like very rarely do survivors call us and they're like, yeah, but I have this sister and I have this friend and I have all these support groups, because what's happened is that the abuser has removed her and controlled the narrative. And when there's only one person controlling that narrative and there are no other voices telling you that you are worthy, that you are intelligent, that you do deserve to work, that it is not okay to be treated this way, right? Then it's hard because you've been isolated emotionally, locationally, right? And so that's when they come to us. And I'm going to say that 90% of my clients have been successfully isolated from any other narrative. And so we have an intake. We just ask some questions, kind of get some basic information. And then I really just ask them what they want. Like, what's your goal? Like, where do you want to be? How do you want, like, I'm here to really make your way through bureaucracy easier. Nobody teaches us how to identify gender-based violence. No schools teach us that. No schools teach us that there's organizations out there to help. Like these things that we, as the GBVSS team, specialize in, is because it is a confusing system, and it is my job to help you maneuver it. It is not my job to tell you what you want from it. And so a lot of it's like, okay, what is the biggest thing? Clothes or shelter or legal or, like literally sometimes it's like, we need to get you out. Like, we need to get you out of this state, And then sometimes it's like, so first you click on this. Do you see where it says ID? Okay, so click on that and then come over here, and that's where you're going to put your information, and then that's how you're going to get an ID, right? Like, and so it really varies from intense stories and just like really that secondary trauma is very real. And then sometimes it's just like, well, the Walmart is actually 3 blocks down that way, and then here's a little way to GPS you there, and so it's really, it's just kind of a back and forth.
Okay, well, I'll go.
Okay, good.
In Karama, we're synced, Karama. So, what it looks like for me, like Avery says, generally it starts with a referral, and sometimes it's a self-referral. It's all the number they're calling, and the level of trauma they experience, even though all of the abuse is traumatic, that still varies, and how the survivor is affected, whether they realize that they are operating out of trauma. Like, a lot of times they don't remember their appointments, and so I often give my survivor a notepad to write down your appointment, write down this, write down that, because trauma affects your brain, like it affects memory, their process, their stories they would tell you is not, it's not linear. It's like all over the place. So they can appear they're not telling the truth because a piece is here, a piece there. So you just kind of have to be able to, assess where they're at, and, to be able to talk to them and to kind of help them to, maneuver where they're trying to go. A lot of survivors, I'll show them this power and control wheel, and I'll just let them read it. And 90% of the time, tears fall when they're reading it. And then they'll say, I didn't realize I was in an abusive relationship. All this stuff on this wheel has been happening to me. So some of them, after reading that, it's like they come to a realization. So it's it's like oh my God. And then it's a horrible moment too, because it's like, okay, now I have to wear this label. I'm an abused woman or abused person. So, and then, like Avery say, just talk to them about, okay, what are your needs? What do you want? What do you need to happen? So what would you like to do? Giving them their power, because often they're like, can you make the decision? I always try to put it back to them so they can start to feel like it's okay to make a decision. You have the right to make a choice. You have the right to say yes or no, you want to do this or not. So I try to help empower them by, giving them back their power to make choices and decisions. And so, yeah, and then we just walk through the process of what they need and, what that looks like for them.
I'm a community advocate and a CSO, which is a community services office through DSHS. So 2 days out of my week, but for COVID, I'm in the Kent CSO or welfare office, where I work specifically with TANF clients. And their barrier to work first participation is domestic violence. And so I create service plans related to them maintaining their TANF benefit. And so like my colleagues, that looks like a referral from a DSHS social worker, usually in their computer system, and then a follow-up, creating an appointment and doing an intake, right? Asking all of the same questions my colleagues ask other ladies, but being more specific to the barrier of domestic violence and what it is that's preventing them from being able to feel like they can go back to work, or what type of assistance they need. Like Avery touched on, there's no cookie cutter way I do it. Each person, it's all individual. We have best practices, yes, but just like shoes, not every shoe fits the same person. So based on the client and their need, if it's a homeless client, I figure out shelter options to refer them to. One thing I will say, that housing piece is the part of the job that leaves me with a hole in my heart, that leaves me sometimes where I'm like, well, what am I even here for? I'm sorry, there's no room at the inn. Hopefully your car is still warm. I have blanket. You know, how do I say I'm advocating and here I'm helping, and I can't even offer you a safe space to sleep for 8 hours, not even a whole week, just for a day. So those housing referrals, food, something we've just started doing here in Kent, they give out food boxes every Wednesday. So myself and a colleague, we go fill our cars up, literally where I have to ask them to leave room so I can see out of my rearview mirror sometimes, because I have a little hatchback, and they're like, oh, this is the lady from the Y, fill her up. And so they fill my car up. And so we make sure that there's food. I share with across the team. I had one of my colleagues from Alvarita Little yesterday called and was, do you have more milk? Do you have this? And I just fixed her up a box. And so sometimes it looks like just making sure the clients have food for the day, making sure they have clothing vouchers, and often that rudimentary counseling piece. I think it's been touched on. Part of what I do, I also do a Zoom group online, and that's my niche. I don't know if you could tell I like to talk, but that's my niche, you know. And so helping reintroduce women to themselves, that's my thing, right? Because in these relationships, honey, you get lost because you're busy trying to please somebody else. So you're busy liking what he likes. You're not knowing what you like. I literally had a woman tell me, I don't know what I like. I haven't been allowed to like anything outside of what he liked. So reintroducing her to herself is something that I intentionally do. I do with gumption. And so for me, that's kind of what my day. And then there could be a day where I'm like, oh, nobody needs anything. I'm going to tinker around the office and be nosy. That's, excuse me, resourceful, and look for other, resources that I can pass on to the community. Cause I don't believe in boundaries, meaning like Pierce County, Thurston County. I'm like, what's available in Washington? We all live here, right? So that's kind of what my day is. And also, I work with a team of amazing women. So it could be a day where I'm like, I'm covering an office for someone else and treating that lady just the same as if she came right from my caseload, or sending a referral to Colette or Bridget for some legal, and securing housing. I just got like 3 families housed in the last like 3 weeks. Do you know how that feels? When you know like 2 of those families you've been working with for like 5 or 6 months to get them housed. So the day in the life of an advocate goes from one day, and then there's a day where you're outside like, I need a minute, and you're letting that release come of those tears, and then you dry your eyes, you do your grounding, and then you're boom, back in the trenches, back at the work. So.
I guess I'll jump in. Thank you, Karama. That just kind of yeah, it's, when we talk about, the journey, right? And we know that the journey continues, and this work is nonstop. But what I'm really grateful for is that, our organization has given us some tools through, through all the staff, frontline workers, is when we had Michelle and some other folks have come in to really talk about what does radical self-care mean, right? Because that's forefront, right? And then being able to that being initiated from our direct supervision, like take a day off, take care of yourself, is because there's still the analogy is that I can't transmit something I don't have. And in order for me to pour into the cup of a survivor, my cup has to be filled. And my cup has to runneth over, right? On most days. And I think, for like Karama talked about, the variations of our day looks different. It could be one day I could receive up to 40 phone calls. That doesn't mean all 40 survivors are ready to make that step. But what has happened is what we know and what statistics show is that it takes at least 7 to 9 times for a survivor to really leave their abusive situation. And even coming out of homelessness, even getting a survivor out of their car into a safe, warm space is still a process. And sometimes we get those calls where it's an immediacy. Sometimes we may get calls from judicial systems or various, the partnerships that we have, right? And so sometimes it's a slower process for some, but because with us having the resources and not having to rely too much on an outside source to be able to respond to the immediate need of the clients have been something that, has allowed us to be what we call is first responders. And within the first 24 hours, rather if that's just return, that's what we're known for, is we're going to call you back within 24 hours, right? And so that, and I'll just give an example and I'll be quiet. So my day started about 7:45 this morning and my phone started ringing. And it came from, it was a referral. And that referral, I didn't get off the phone until about maybe 8:20. And then getting off that call, while I was on that call, I got 3 other calls, right? Then I got to call those numbers back immediately because I need to assess the emergency and the need and the crisis right then and there. And then I was on a meeting of a graduation of 8 survivors who have completed a class, right? A job readiness class within our organization. So I was on that. And then I said, okay, well, I got to get ready for this. So got to get ready for Freestyle Friday. But in between that, when I talk about the multitude of calls, because we do have a toll-free text and phone line as well. And I think if we can put that in the chat too, we do have a line that is 24 hours. And so that was just my typical day today. Some days I'm getting calls all throughout the night. And some days I just have to shut my phone off and respond to the calls the next day, because that's where I get to take care of myself. And I'm talking about like those calls to where, like Karama said, you just got to take a deep breath and not go into the crisis of what you're hearing, but being able to know, like, what is my next step with this, right? So when I lay my head down on the pillow, that I can go to sleep and have a sound sleep and knowing that I did the best that I could to be able to help that person on the other end of the phone.
Thank you, Nature. Is there anybody else who would like to talk a little bit about the day in the life of supporting a survivor?
Hello. I can touch on a little bit of shelter advocate. As you guys can see, it's kind of busy off and on. That's why I keep clicking in and out of the presentation. But a day in the life of a shelter advocate can range from maybe a quiet day to we're on the phone constantly answering crisis calls. As far as shelter, we get a lot of calls that have nothing to do with domestic violence, and we're rerouting and we're finding resources and outsourcing from that. As far as our clients, we can be anywhere, doing anything from a listening ear. We can be helping help them get their kids into school. We can be helping them get connected to mental health services, trying to connect to housing, get employment started, DSHS started, childcare, clothing. There's a lot that we do as far as sitting in shelter. It's not just we get them here, get them in a room, and that's it. That's all. We watch kids. We help cook. We distribute food. We have food bank deliveries every week. We do a little bit of everything around here. Trying to think as far as just like a typical day. It can range from anything. Like I said, it could just be a day of just answering phone calls. And then there's days like Karama said where we have to close this door and cry. There's times where we have to support each other in self-care. There's times where I'm on burnout and I don't know, and it'll take Avery or Doris or Nature to be like, hey, like, you need a break, step back. So we are here for our clients, but we also support each other in a lot of ways as well.
I appreciate that. And I think, what everybody has spoken to is, that this work can be traumatizing, at times challenging, pretty much always, with the systems that you have to just deal with and the barriers that you need to overcome. It's not an easy job, what you do. And so what motivates and inspires you to get up every day and keep doing the work? And how do you deal with the secondary trauma that can come with it?
I can say for me, myself, Keisha, what motivates me every day is that I'm a nurturer by nature. So even in my burnout, I shake it off. I may cuss and fuss for a couple of minutes, drop a tear or two, and okay, let's start over. And I'm just here. I just want to make a difference. Even if I can only make a difference in one survivor's life a month, I feel like I've done my job. And so my motivation is just helping people progress.
I love everything that Dominique said. I truly believe that every single individual deserves to feel safe in their own home. And that's what's important to me, is making sure that as many people as possible can feel safe where they're living. Yeah.
I think my motivation is pretty much the same, seeing a survivor transforming from victim to thriver. And so it may be months, it may be a year, but to see it, and to be part of that process to help them walk through it. I love my job. I literally love my job. I've never had a job where I love my job. It doesn't feel like work to me. And so, it's to be able to empower somebody, to be able to give someone information that answers a question for them, gives them a sense of direction, a sense of self, letting them know that they are valuable. And I often share with the survivors, your experience is your experience. It doesn't make you, your experience is not who you are. It's something that happened in the continuum of your process of living. And so now that you have stopped and you're looking at it and you're making choices, so now you can change the direction. So now you can use this, you can put it in your toolbox and use it, as a tool now. It doesn't have to be something that, that keeps you down. It could be now used as a tool, you know, as you walk through the healing process. So.
I do this work because I am both a child and adult survivor, a young adult survivor who's healed, who's healing, who in my own other life, I'm a part of a griot troupe, and we feel, build, healed, and grow is our motto. And so I came into the work, I'm a social service novice, right? So I'm going to be the best social service worker fresh out of college. And I got into domestic violence on accident with no intent, really, just I was doing a job, and I'm one of those, show me how to do it once, I got you. It looks like I've been doing it for years, right? And so I talked my way, literally, into a job as an advocate. And at that facility, that advocate was responsible for 2 groups. I never facilitated a group, but again, I like to talk. So that's where I figured that this is what my purpose was, because that's where I realized I reintroduced a woman to herself. That's not an original. I'd like to coin it as my original phrase, but one of a thank you letter. That's what she said. Thank you for introducing me to myself again. I had forgot who I was. And I was like, oh, clutched my pearls. I felt so good. Like I did that for someone. I'm just Karama, right? Oftentimes we see ourselves as just this human, this being, but to somebody else, we're this great light being. So I do this work because I know what it's like to be on the table and not be looking at someone that looked like me and feel judged and feel biased because of how I look or their cultural bias against people that look like me. So I do it because I want to be the change in the world that I want to see. And like Dominique and Colette have said, everybody deserves to feel safe in their home. And I work with an amazing team. Like Bridget said, I like coming to work. I mean, I want to work myself out a job in theory. Heal everyone. There's no violence. Men are healed. Everyone's having equitable relationships. Women are healing, right? I want to work myself out of the job and then move into something different. But we know, you know, with society and our nice little COVID quarantine life, we're not working ourselves out of a job anytime soon. So because I'm still here, I like to come to work. You know, who am I healing today? Who's re-meeting herself today? Who's getting a house today? Type of thing, right? Because it feels good to be able to know I had a hand in helping somebody heal or being a catalyst to their healing. And like Dominique said, if it's just one lady this week, that month, I've done my work, because that one lady, she's going to touch somebody. She's going to touch her kids. She's going to remember something I said, and it's still going to, you know, kind of that ripple effect and just go all out into the sea. So that's why I do what I do.
I'm going to say what's already been said. I love my job. I do this because I want to, and I do this because I'm a survivor as well. And there's a lot of talk, I mean, like, oh, survivor-led. And I'm like, it's really hard. This work is very hard. And coming out on the other side, having met yourself again, learning that what you experienced was abuse and nobody told you, right? I learned about the abuse I experienced when I was in training to do this work. And that was just that made me so angry. Because I've seen it, experienced it, and I was like, no one told me that, like, your boyfriend's not supposed to run off with your car for 5 days and then blame you because he lost it. Like, why? Like where? And that gap in our education as a society is something that's really drawn me to this work. And somebody once told me, they said, well, it's easier to raise strong kids than fixed injured adults. And I was like, I refuse to adhere to that philosophy, because we are not giving up on the people who have been injured. Like, that does not Like, what? No. And so working in this field, working with survivors of gender-based violence, women who will have children and who will raise their children, to empower them to raise their children in a new narrative, that they, to start that narrative over, start that, like, change that family dynamic, demonstrate what it is to be empowered, demonstrate what it is to be in a healthy relationship, right? That, then you're fixing the injured adult and raising strong children, right? That's the crux. And that's, like, there's so much wrong in this world, and it can be overwhelming. And that's the bit I've chosen to focus on, right? Like, that bit. And it makes it worth it. I had, just this morning, I was talking to a client, and she just started sobbing, and she was like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like, you are an angel. And I was like, I mean, egoically, that's fun, but also just like, this is my job, right? Like, and that, like, that's so amazing. And then you have clients who are like, you're nothing, you're the worst, you don't get it, I hate you, and then say a bunch of stuff I'll never say on this because it's not, play. And you're like, all right, you know what? Like, you can feel that way. And you can go tell my boss you feel that way, and you can come back to me, and I'll still work with you. Because you know what? Like, you don't have to like me. You don't have to agree with me. You could also be having a trauma reaction, and I'm not the person you want to talk to about it. And so it's like, taking things personally can't be done in this work. One, either the good or the bad, because it's like, I'm here to facilitate your growth. All of that being said, if I didn't work on the team I work on, with the women I work with and the management I work with, I don't know if I would have lasted my first year. Because that support, that ability to call and chat, the fact that Dominique will bring me donuts when she knows I'm having a hard week, and like, like that, we just, like, we have each other because it's hard work, and life is hard, and COVID is hard, right? America's been it's been hard. And so, and we have each other, and it's so fun. It's amazing. It's like a team. And so without the support of our community and of each other, I don't know what I'd be saying, but it'd be different.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Avery, and to all of you for sharing all the things that you have here today. You make me really proud to call myself your colleague at YWCA. I am really amazed by the work that you do, and just thankful that you're doing it, because, like so many people, I have had those experiences in my own life, and so it just is very inspiring to see so many women who are so supportive of each other and so supportive of survivors in our community, and helping them really heal and get to the next step in their lives and touch that next generation. So we're going to wrap this up with one more spoken word piece by Karama, titled Black Women. So Karama, I will pass it over to you.
Before Karama goes, I didn't get a chance to share what keeps me in this work.
I am so sorry, Nanger. How did I forget you?
That's fine. Now I would consider myself a matriarch in this work, right? I've been doing this work for over 20 years. And it started, and I won't be long, it started with, my own struggle. And I also am a survivor too. And I don't talk a lot of times about being a survivor, is because people won't take you as seriously. It depends on what table you're sitting at, right? And I want my voice to be heard, and I want to be that that spoken voice for the unheard women who won't be invited to the table, right? And so, people ask me, God, Nature, I can't believe you're still doing this work. I do this work because this is a part of my thrive in life, and it's my duty and my responsibility to give back. I always talk about like being pulled back from the gates of hell, and my life being renewed and restored, to be rejuvenated, to be on the front line, like helping. It would be easy for me to just be sitting back and pushing paper, but that's not my role. And that's not been my assignment. And that's not my, it's a part of my responsibility and my duties. But, you know, when I think about burnout, I think about burnout in a capacity and left, at least I'm just like absolutely tired, right? Like, you know, I'm still known in the community as the condom lady. That's how like my journey began, like, you know, coming off the streets, you know, coming out of incarceration 25 years ago, and somebody gave me a duffel bag with condoms in it and said, go back to the community where you're at and give these condoms out, right? And I did that, and I did it with pride, and I did it with diligence, but I didn't know that I was being conditioned to be in the seat where I'm at today. And I'm glad that I didn't give up. I'm glad that I continue to blaze the trail to be a mentor for women who come behind me. And I also too, I'm, you know, my shoulders are being strengthened so that way that the young Black women come behind me can say, I want to stand on the shoulders of my, you know, the leaders in my community, right? And I don't do this work with trying to be popular. I don't do this work with trying to be famous in the hood or anything like that. But I know that I've been shifted in my own life from a place of pain into a place and being in position to give back. And my struggle to success is being able, my tireless effort is to be able to, because I'm not in the struggle and I'm not transitioning anymore. Like I'm solid, right? I've been tried and tested. I can be utilized at a forefront to not just mentor, but to be an ear, a listening ear, and to be supportive. And again, like to emphasize like the amazing dynamic women that are on this team. And we've had some wonderful women who have left us too, right? And knowing that, you know, what we can do together and that strengthens this process only just allows us to do greater and better work, you know. So I'm grateful to be a part of a, you know, a team that to say we are the team that wants to see the change in our society and in our community that we will want to be. You know, when I started this journey, there was no programs for survivors like me. And I'm talking about like 25 something years ago. There was no programs to respond to my immediate need as a survivor, right? And I think a part of that, I stayed out there a little longer. But so part of my vision and my duty is that I want to be a representation of what I didn't get. Because there's so many young women that are in our society that have normalized the behavior and you know, and just like this whole systemic like root of being, you know, I need to stay in this, you know. And for most young girls that I talk to, I have 3 adult daughters, 35, 31, want to be 31. Oh, she's going to be mad at me if I say what, 35, 31, and 28. And when people look at me, they don't take me as seriously, but I say, look, I'm somebody's grandmother, a 15-year-old Black boy. So why would I want to stop now, right? I'm only halfway through. And this is what, and I'll close, I'm not a spoken word person, but I always say, if you want a day in my shoes, you go ahead and you grab my shoes. I guarantee you won't be able to take a few steps in my shoes because my shoes were designed for me. My shoes were given to me to fit me, right? So I don't ever want to use the analogy is that I want your shoes because you don't know what I had to do to get what I got. And I don't want anybody to experience the pain that I've ever had to endure, right? But I want to, you know, continue to be, you know, we're all natural born leaders, but for me, it's kind of like being pushed out there to be able to really look at what the principles of life is and what it has been. And so that's what continues to keep me thriving. I love what I do. I eat, sleep, and breathe social work. It is embedded, it's embedded in me. And you're talking about a person that I was a taker majority of all my life. That's all I knew. I grew up poor. I didn't have any resources. My life was restricted as a young age. And who would have ever said that nature was the most likely to succeed? And some of those people that said that are some of the people I still sit at the table with. And I said, now, what was you talking about when I was younger? So that's what continues to allow me to be able to show up to the table, to be that unheard voice and to talk about the uncomfortable conversations that nobody wants to have. So make sure, don't forget, oh, you can't see my earrings. Don't forget to vote. We're 10 days away from our election. Thank you.
Yes, voting is very critical. Thank you for that reminder. And I would also like to say thank you for my earrings, Nature. See you. Sorry, I was having problems with my mute there. Um, so is there anybody else that I missed? I'm so sorry, Nature. Okay. Well, then we're just going to wrap up today's conversation with a spoken word piece by Karima Williams, titled Black Women.
We sustain ourselves in your subconscious mind, tickling your brain or perhaps telling you rhyme. As you look into our eyes, questioning and wondering how and why, answers, we have none for you. How can we tell you what leaves our essence round you? Maybe it's the grace in our steps, the beauty of our smiles, or better yet, the realness and originality of all our individual styles. Maybe it's the strength of our simple being, or maybe it's that natural glow of ours which you keep seeing. Maybe it's the passion that flows from our hips, or could it be those sometimes seemingly sassy words which fall from our oftentimes full lips? Maybe you haven't heard. Black woman is every woman and started off the whole human journey. Word. Black woman I am, melanin being and goddess indeed. I'm not waiting round for anyone to stand round, push me out the way, or tell me what I can't have any day. Rather, I stick to my strong sister queens all day, every day. Many people would have thought that Black women wouldn't make it too far. We've had one in your White House, we have plenty in your courthouses, and we're all abound your TV screens. It seems to me as if we are up to par.
Thank you, Karima. That is definitely what I needed to get my weekend started, and just got me excited thinking of all the possibilities of Black women in leadership that might happen soon enough if we are lucky enough. Thank you all for joining us today again. If you would
I
like
want to interject.
Oh, please
There
do.
was a question in the Q&A.
There
Please let's get
was
to it because she's asking about it in the chat.
We answered that question. The question is, how would you handle an adult child in need of resources? Alcoholism, drug abuse, homelessness, domestic violence. It sounds like a lot of things. I would say contact YWCA would be a good first place to start. But if any one of you has specific directions, but I thought that we could follow up directly with that person, because it sounds like there's a lot of different potential ways that can go. And we know that there's a lot of people in our community who are in need right now, and just really appreciative of all of you for doing the work day in and day out to try to help people get their needs met and to become thrivers, because we really truly all deserve that opportunity. And so again, I will just shout out, go to our website for a recording. We will get a recording of today's webinar up as soon as possible. And we have recordings from all of our other ones as well. We had some really, really amazing presentations. I've definitely learned a lot. And thank you all for joining us today. And we will see you next year for the Week Without Violence. I will also say, tomorrow is Self-Care Saturday, so if you follow YWCA on social media, you will get some tips and some suggestions on what does radical self-care look like? How do you heal from trauma? All of us need that help, but particularly people who have been experiencing gender-based violence. In Nature, it looks like did you want to add something before we leave?
Yes, we're hiring. So go to the YWCA works.org and look for under gender-based violence. I know we'll be having some things out Monday, Tuesday, but we definitely have some openings on our team. So if you want to be a part, if you want to be a part of this great, phenomenal, amazing team of advocates, send in your resume and your cover letter, and we'll see what you're working with. So definitely get the word out there. If you're not looking, get the word out there that we are definitely hiring. So I definitely wanted to put that out there too. And don't forget to vote.
And I also would like to let everybody know that Nature will be speaking on another panel for Domestic Violence Awareness Month on race and trafficking. And I just put a link to that in the Q&A. And so we'll try to put as many of the resources that we've shared with you today online, but if you have any questions or any follow-up, please feel free to just reach out to us at YWCA, shoot us a message, social media, any of the ways, contact us, and we will do our best to answer you. Happy Friday. Thank you, ladies, for the amazing Freestyle Friday. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate every one of you. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.